You open the book with this story about this very small collective, medical marijuana collective in Santa Cruz. A collective, and I know these people as well, really treating seriously ill patients, and many of their patients die because they have terminal illnesses. The feds decide to go after this collective. What happens?
Well, yeah, compared to what followed, this was literally the Garden of Eden. And you had seriously and terminally ill patients in the Santa Cruz Mountains growing their own plants. They had a 167 plant garden. There were wheelchair ramps between the plants. Many of the people who tended the garden died. They had their ashes scattered above the garden. And in 2002, the Drug Enforcement Administration, heavily armed units led by a former Marine who was an air marshal after 9/11, they raided this colony, and they arrested a woman, Valerie Corral, who was kind of known as the Mother Teresa of the medical marijuana movement, her caregiver husband. They rousted a polio patient from her bed. They confiscated and destroyed the marijuana plants. And it created such an outrage, such a backlash. You literally had wheelchair patients and other activists trying to block the DEA convoy from leaving.
Well, they locked them into the compound
at
some point,
They locked the gates to
right?
shut them in. And then within days afterwards, they were giving out medicinal brownies and openly smoking cannabis at City Hall. The state lawmakers complained, and all of a sudden California lawmakers start looking at the first time coming up with some sort of regulations to implement the Proposition 215 Compassionate Use Act so that people can get their medicine and maybe not have such fear of raids. So what they did was they institutionalized this collective model. But it didn't turn out to be the one that we saw in the Santa Cruz Mountains. It turned out to be large retail-style stores that were not really covered for in the language of the law.
And now, this was the 1996 Compassionate Use Act. This is what legalized medical marijuana to begin with, but it was very vague. And we were talking earlier, there's a prominent attorney who basically says the only thing, in terms of a business model, the only thing that the initiative legalized was some kind of pure communism or pure socialism, in that there couldn't really be any profit taking. And that was the case with this collective in Santa Cruz, right? They really were sort of the socialist model.
That was the case in Santa Cruz. So in 2003, the legislature passed a law known as Senate Bill 420, named after the pot moniker.
April 20th.
April 20th, and there's lots of legends about that, which we can get into. But essentially what the legislation said was medical marijuana patients can associate to collectively or cooperatively grow marijuana.
And that was it. That was all they said about production. Right.
And all of a sudden, within 5 to 7 years, we have $1 billion retail-style industry hanging on those threads of cooperative cultivation. It's an amazing narrative.